Good evening, colleagues. To the last session of the CPD Masterclass via audio conference. I trust you are well and keeping safe. Thank you once more for joining this session. We welcome those that are with us on Facebook and also on YouTube and on Teams. Thank you very much once more for joining this session. Hopefully we'll have a beautiful one through this moment. We will take you through just a few slides. Thereafter, we can engage in discussions. My name is Zianda Mfuku, Senior Manager at the Office of the Registrar in the Unit Pharmacy Practice. And I do have a few of our colleagues joining us from the office, both at Communications and Professional Affairs, who will assist in making sure that we answer the questions or direct us to the right place. During this session, what we will address are CPD requirements. We will talk to the issue of annual declaration and ending up at designation, CPD essentials, looking at competency standards, breaking them down to the domains and the competencies together with the behaviors that are included in the competency standards for pharmacists. The frequently asked questions will address that. And we'll also touch on how do we learn? What types of learning is the correct learning, perhaps, for what constitutes a CPD activity and the evidence. We'll talk through those. We'll also talk to the matter of compliance and archives. And then we'll just touch on on highlights, and then we can then have a discussion. Please do feel free to drop questions on the chat section. I know that those on Facebook, once they post a question, we're able to view it on this side so that we can answer as much as possible. My colleague Raisibe will take over perhaps in the question and answer section. So what are the requirements of CPD? I'm hoping when we do know what is required of us to be compliant with CPD. So we need to complete an annual declaration, latest by the 1st of February of each year. So by this year, when the year began, by the 1st of February of 2021, it is expected of myself and yourself to have declared ourselves whether we are practicing or non-practicing. The second leg of then complying to CPD requirements is a submission of a minimum at least 6 CPD activities in a year. And then we maintain a portfolio of evidence. What does this mean? You do not submit. I hope there are no interns here, because interns, if you are here, you certainly must submit your evidence. Otherwise, you will not pass your CPDs. To the registered persons here, you do not submit your evidence, but you do keep it. Another thing that we must highlight very seriously is the issue that manual submissions are not allowed by council. The electronic system has been developed for each and every user to be able to upload. As we go through it today, through the slides, you will see if you haven't done so yet, but we do acknowledge that a whole lot of us are already compliant, so we know how the system works, but we just need to highlight that no manual submissions are allowed. I have already mentioned that we do not upload evidence. The annual declaration. This is covered on the regulations relating to CPD that we need to declare annually whether we're practicing or non-practicing. The annual declaration has been based, even the entire CPD system, in fact, on the document called Competency Standards for Pharmacists in South Africa, and it is published as Board Notice 59 of 2018. Once you have designated yourself or gone through all the behaviors or the competencies of the competency standard, the result would be either that you are practicing or non-practicing. What does this mean? I will come to this note after I explain what we mean. Practicing is you are performing one or more of the scopes of the acts pertaining to the scope of practice for which you are registered. As a pharmacist, we know our scope of practice. You go to the practice regulations, regulation 3 and 4, you know what it is that you do on a daily basis. If you are not practicing, 0 of the scope of practice, right? So the question is, what happens if I don't go into the system and designate myself? The regulations state that if a Ziyanda does not go in to declare themselves as whether they are practicing or non-practicing, you shall be auto-designated as practicing. So the default takes it that you are a practicing pharmacist. So it is important to declare, especially to those people that are not practicing, actually to all of us, because you'd rather say it yourself that you are practicing. And we have had some few questions where a person says, I'm still looking for a job, so why shall I do an annual declaration? I would say certainly do so, because our learning is not only limited by the fact that you are within the 4 walls of a building. You may be, while you are looking for a job, reading journals, attending sessions, keeping yourself up to speed to what is happening to the profession. Indeed, you are learning, and therefore you can submit a CPD activity or even at least do an annual declaration. So what we then do is we have to look ourselves on the competency framework according to the CPD guidance document, which has been published by Council in 2020. So the terms that are there, we have a domain as an umbrella. Then we have the competencies, and under the competencies, we have got behavioral statements. So that is the behavior that you then show. The competency standards, therefore, with their domains, competencies, and behavioral statements, the behavioral statements are also broken down into 3: entry level, intermediate, and advanced practice. And entry level could be that you are within the first 3 years of practice, intermediate 3 to 7 years, advanced greater than 7 years. But I don't like to limit it to just the number of years for which we were registered or appear on the register. Some of us it's 5 years, some of us is 20 years, etc. However, I may be very advanced in an institutional environment because I've worked there for longer. That is possible. However, when I then get employment, or I seek, or I see that in my future I want to develop in regulatory affairs, it is something I've never done. So for me, that learning is actually at entry level because it is a work that I've never ever done before. Yes, I might have studied a little bit about it in my undergrad, but because I'm only entering practice at that level, you can then look at behaviors at that level. But that is the choice that you always have to make when you're about to submit your CPD activities. So as I said, you are new in the field at entry level and you have more experience at advanced practice, and we take it that greater than 7 years, you are mastering that area of practice. The competency standards are divided into 6 domains. I will not name them one by one, but it is important that we familiarize ourselves with these domains. And I would like to challenge us also today that most of the work that we do, whether we are in clinical work or in management roles or in offices, that somewhere in the domains, you would find a competency that is suitable to the task that you perform daily or the one that you wish to go and perform in future. For the example today, we structured it. It's got the domain public health, as we said. The question that you would ask yourself is, does the domain apply to me? Public health, right? So here then when you see the competencies, they talk to promoting health and wellness, they talk to health economics, primary health care, epidemic and disaster management. I'm making an example. For an example, we're going through a pandemic now. Domain, competency standard 1.5 becomes very applicable to yourself. So when you go through these competency standards, it all actually helps you and assists you to map out your learning. Now, also what we have found is that we get a number of questions at the office. That I'm not working in a clinical setting, I work in a medical aid environment, managed care health. Am I practicing? Certainly you are. You've got a lot of interaction with prescriptions. You interact with other healthcare professionals, which are your medical practitioners in this instance, to ensure that the prescriptions that are written out do align. You do medicine reviews. So yes, you are practicing. And another person says, but I'm a lecturer. But of course, you're imparting a scope of practice, be it of a pharmacist or of a pharmacist assistant or pharmacy support personnel. So you are practicing. I do research, or I sit in an office and just develop policies. But those policies are about to guide someone who is practicing a scope of a practice of practice for which they are registered. So definitely you are practicing. So practicing is not limited to a person who works in a community pharmacy or an institutional pharmacy. Even those in manufacturing, wholesale, regulatory affairs, office policy development, they are certainly, and in academia, certainly you are practicing the scope of practice of a pharmacist. And we've just included this slide just to actually strengthen the slide before that the work that you do is not necessarily limited to non-clinical, to clinical work. Pharmacy is so diverse. So if we would want to limit our scope of practice to just interacting with a patient, that's not all that there is to pharmacy. And therefore, it helps us to know that we are practicing in that regard. Look, once you say you are a non-practicing pharmacist at the end, it would mean that you are in no role talking about pharmacy in any time in any day of your life. And I'm sure most of us, that's not the case here. From time to time, you find yourself, even if when you work in your office, if you're like me, you've got relatives that phone you and ask about this medicine or this disease or the other. And all of a sudden, whether I wanted to learn or not, I have to go and search if I didn't know about the learning. And then I say I have collected information that I did not know before, and therefore I'm better competent to perform my tasks. So how do we learn? Even without going through this slide word for word, we can be chatting to yourself. I see Mr. Mulder sitting there listening to me, but Mr. Mulder we can be having a conversation about a certain prescription, and then all of a sudden he tells me something I did not know, I did not realize. I have learned. That is my learning, right? I used to learn a lot from my tutor when I was an intern, and from many interactions that I've had with pharmacists in my work as a pharmacist, and I'm still learning even today. You can be studying for yourself or reading an article or reading a journal. You can be you can be in a conference, and as you attend the different sessions in the conference, you are starting to gain different information of things you did not know. Some of them you went in there with particular interest that I want to learn, and some of them you found yourself in that session, and then you're like, oh, okay, I did not know that I did not know that. You have just learned. That is learning. Now let's come to stuff that is more formal. You may decide to attend a short course or to register for a short course. You may be an invited guest at some conference or to speak somewhere, and you have to research the topic that you are going to be addressing. You will be learning things at that point in time. You may even go even more deeper to say what I need to learn actually needs me to go and go into postgrad studies. I need to go and do, I want to be a PCDT pharmacist, so I go and do my pharmacotherapy 1, 2, and advanced, or even do a master's program, etc. So your learning will be guided by yourself. You do need to determine that this is what I do not know. For me to learn it, I need to do this. Some of it is simpler than in another way, which is why council does not specify what is forced for you to do, because it is determined by what you need to learn. So CPD is a process for us to continuously enhance our competence throughout our careers, and it enables us to demonstrate, or to develop rather, in our area of practice, and even spread our wings even wider than that to demonstrate our competency. And as the word says, CPD, continuing professional development, it is continuing. So it is cyclical, because you may learn one thing today, and from that one learning, it may show you that there's something else that you did not know. And the fact that it is continuing is that we continually learn on a daily basis. The process itself has the 6 CPD entries. As we said before, we've got 2 types of cycles for you to use on the electronic system. It is the 4-step cycle, which we will go into. You can submit as many number of activities in a year. There is someone who in 2020 submitted 41 activities, using the 4-step cycle. Council further approved that a maximum of 3 CPD activities in a year can be submitted using a 2-step cycle, which is more, it's a shortened version of submission. And most of the time this works in an example that I used just before, that you enter into a session and you find out something that you didn't know. But when you entered, you didn't plan to learn that. You just happened to be there and learned a new thing. But we will talk to it when we get there. Again, we emphasize no evidence must be attached. The 4-step cycle. You have to reflect. That's step number 1. I do not know how to ride a bicycle. I'm using this as a very simplistic example here. What do you plan to do for you to learn to ride a bicycle? I will go to a friend who cycles, who's an expert, on such and such a date. We'll spend a weekend, him or her teaching me, or them teaching me how to ride a bicycle. Implementation, you then do what you set out to do, right? Or sometimes even do what you didn't set out to do, but you found along the way that that is the best way to do it. I visited my friends, we went out and we hired bikes, because I don't have a bike yet. I do want to buy it. And then I rode on the bike and I cycled, etc. That's implementation. Now you're actually doing. When you're evaluating, now you say, at reflection, I set out to learn to ride a bike. Do I know how to ride a bike? Then you say, I have achieved what I set out to learn. Of course, because we said this is cyclical, it is possible that at evaluation, after you say, yes, I have learned about infectious disease, infection control, then you think, but perhaps I don't know much about wound care. Can I maybe let me, it triggered, that learning triggered something else. You can then write it under evaluation to say, as much as I have learned what I said to learn I have now thought about something else I actually do not know. So that's how it becomes cyclical. The two-step cycle starts at the implementation stage. As I had said previously, what you do, you go in and you talk to your colleague and they tell you something that you did not know, You're already at implementation stage because it's like, aha, okay, they say this tablet can be used for such and such and such. You're already at implementation because you did not think beforehand that you did not know, and you need to go out and issue, you set yourself that task. And at evaluation, then you said, no, after that session of chatting as colleagues, or of that talk, or of that reading that article, now I know what to do in issues of infection control. Then you close that cycle. Right, so only 3 activities may be submitted using a two-step cycle. We encourage that you actually go through the competency standards, develop a learning plan to say, this is what I set out to learn, and then go into the CPD cycle to submit. Now, what does a good CPD activity constitute? You will need to have a title to start with. Nothing fancy. It's not a research thesis of any kind. If you're saying, I want to learn how to bake, just write there's a title, baking a cake, and that's it. Do not try and complicate it much. Let it state exactly what it is that you want to learn according to the domain and the competency that you have selected. You must be able to identify gaps of knowledge that you do have, that, okay, I need to know this. For example, with interns, we would say, I do not know how to schedule to balance a Schedule 6 book. That is a gap that you are identifying of yourself. What am I going to do? Then you identify your learning method, which is, am I going to register for a degree? Am I just going to register for a short course? Am I just going to read an article to get the information that I want? Or can I just ask the pharmacist next to me to say, what do you think about this matter? And then you discuss it and come to a solution and you get an answer. You have knowledge that you did not know. And then you must also have an outcome on what it is that you have learned and how is it improving your skill or your competency. And the issue of evidence, as we have highlighted, we do not upload evidence, right? However, when you are keeping your portfolio of evidence, you do need to make sure that it's current. That means it's within the year that you are submitting an entry for. So for 2021, your evidence must be of work that is done in 2021. So you cannot post a back date to say, I learned this in 2018 and bring that in 2021. It's current. It must be valid, valid and relevant, talking to the point that you have set out to say that you are going to learn about. That is the evidence that you keep, yet again, not to be uploaded on the CPD system for pharmacists. So I think I've already mentioned this bullet, that it must be within the year, the current year, and its documents. The evidence is the stuff that you are collecting. For example, someone said to me just this afternoon, I attended this course and I received a certificate. I said, definitely the certificate is not is not your learning, but the certificate is evidence that you were there in attendance. Now go into the system and upload what it is that you learned for you to obtain that certificate. So if 5 topics were addressed in a particular setting, then you have learned 5 different things. You actually have 5 CPD activities right there at that very moment. So the evidence there would be what? The very certificate that you obtained, but it doesn't show learning, obviously. So we need to make sure about the issue of evidence. At some point, council has moved to the point to say that perhaps in the first few years, for registered persons, let's hold on to the issue of marking whether you are correct, you are competent or not competent, because we don't doubt your competence. You are a pharmacist after all. Council does not doubt that competence. So what we encourage is that you become compliant. That means you must submit your annual declaration and 6 CPD activities. So it is very, very important, colleagues, that we continuously learn. I think we actually do, we just never put it on paper. And then we've also received quite a number of questions where a person phones or writes to council to say, I submitted 6 entries, am I now compliant? What then we have sought to introduce to the system is that as you go into your CPD system or in the compliance step on the dashboard, you should be able to see the year that you are working with. You should see when your annual declaration was completed, your role as a pharmacist, whether you are practicing or non-practicing according to the outcome of the annual declaration you were submitting. If you notice here, for 2020, there's no longer a button to update that annual declaration. An annual declaration gets locked, right? So each declaration lasts for that year. So for 2020, you have declared yourself practicing, and you cannot update that. You cannot change it 2 years later that, no, in fact, I wasn't practicing in 2020. But certainly in 2021, as the year progresses, things may change. You may be practicing and suddenly 4 months later, then you decide, no, actually, let me take sabbatical and stop pharmacy for 7 years. Then you can come and update the declaration there and say you are non-practicing, or your practice setting changes. And then you want to update your annual declaration, you certainly can. But the moment it becomes the 1st of February of the following year, you are unable to make changes to your annual declaration. Sorry about that. Something moved much faster than I wanted it to move. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. And then lastly, what I did want to show was that where it says entries, you are able to see how many you have submitted. The moment it says submitted for compliance, that means Pharmacy Council has received it. You can rest easy. Now, what happens when you say, I've submitted 6, I submitted 6, but here on entries, it shows submitted for compliance 4. Go back into your submissions where it says my submissions. Check if indeed it did press the submit button. And if you did press the submit button and it's not there, indeed, please do not hesitate using the platforms of council to write to us to say, I did submit all 6. I see only 4. I have checked my system that I've indeed pressed the submit button, because sometimes what happens, a person didn't press the submit button at the end and it's still sitting in the background waiting for the submit button. But just make sure, and then you can write to us for us to correct if that's the state. So that is just to make it easy for yourself to see that indeed council is seeing the 10, the 6, the 5 that you have already submitted. So it gives you a summary thereof. And as we draw to a close, there is no assessment for competence. The expectation is that we just remain compliant. No CPD points. It's not collecting points, but it is about the learning that you obtained during any session that you attended, be it a formal or an informal session that you were attending. So it's not about the accumulation of points, but about the learning that you have received. No third-party entries are allowed. What does this mean? It means I cannot ask a colleague and share my password details with them and say they must submit for me. Council has published in one of the Pharmacy articles 3 years or it's actually 2 years, 2019 volume, where it highlighted very strongly about the issue of having people giving others their login details. Remember, once you give someone your login details, you've just given them your entire life about Council. If they change anything there and you do not know about it, you would be compromised, in fact. So keep your login details safely and make sure that this remains confidential. So please do submit your own entries and activities. And again, we need to highlight, if you are non-practicing or you have been designated as non-practicing, you may not be working in a pharmacy or providing, actually, let's not even say working in the pharmacy. You may not provide any of the services nor the acts pertaining to the scope of practice of a pharmacist. Because the moment you then touch that prescription and dispense it, you are then being contrary to the code of conduct, because you are no longer, you said you are not practicing. So you are not expecting now to be dispensing, to be writing policies, to be giving other people advice about, no, don't do that, it's not allowed, because you said you are not practicing. What advice are we giving if you are not practicing? So if you would want to continue in the area of pharmacy, I know we work till we are gray and old as pharmacists. We make sure we push it to the utter limit, and we love our jobs. Please designate yourself as practicing. And I do also know that we then continue on even after we retire, go on and do locums. By the way, when you do locums, you are practicing. Other people have asked that question from the office. We are a lifelong learners, and therefore, again, I say it's not we've already been learning. Okay, I think one highlight that we do need to say on the Android phones and on Apple iOS, you're able to download the SAPC app, the registration app. It's called SAPC registration app. When you download that, you are able to access with your PIN number and password that you use on the website, your registration details, and thus Council no longer prints registration cards. You are able to upload a new picture if you want to change the one that is there. You are able to update personal details, and the only personal details, by the way, you may be able to amend are your telephone numbers, email address, and whichever ones you can amend on the website, and the physical address. But otherwise, you cannot just change your ID number. Obviously, you can imagine for security reasons, you can't be changing your ID number on the app. So you'd need to come through to customer care for that. And then the CPD system itself is there on the app. So you are able, using your smartphone or your tablet, able to do CPD activities. I usually say when you are sitting waiting at the airport, it's just that we don't get much joy of that these days, too much. But if you still are able to travel and you're sitting at the airport, you've just learned something. With your app, you may be able to do a CPD activity there and then. We have received a few questions that we compiled as we were preparing for these sessions. Some of you did submit questions. We haven't covered all of them here. Whatever we haven't covered here today is definitely going to be captured on the frequently asked questions under the CPD blog on the website. Right. So we got one question that said, do we use the intern manual to complete CPDs as pharmacists? You can use it because it's got a wealth of information. It's just that when you follow that, the senior manager of pre-registration will be very happy, because all of us, when we submit CPD, will be very thorough, you see, because you'd be following the guidelines of what interns must do. So yes, you can use it. Definitely you can, but you don't have to. What is developed for us as pharmacists is the CPD guidance document. Familiarize yourself with that, perhaps, rather, so that you don't find yourself wanting to upload evidence when you don't have to, and frustrated that the evidence does not cover 75% of the behavioral statements. You know, that's what is said to interns, but that's not what is required of ourselves here. And the other question is, can I remain registered if I'm no longer practicing? Certainly you can. You can be paying your annual fees, and therefore you remain registered with council, and you may then declare yourself as non-practicing. Once you declare yourself as non-practicing, you may continue to submit CPD on the platform, but it's not mandatory for you. But if you want to remain registered, you can remain registered. There's quite a number of people actually on our register that are designated non-practicing. They want to stay there on the register, and so they pay the fee to stay on the registers of council. The other question is, I'm registered in July. Do I complete all 6? Council has made a decision that the amount of CPDs is prorated. So how that is calculated is, it's 6 over 12 months. So the expectation is that every 2 months you have submitted as an activity. So if you enter the system at month number 7, it will be calculating that half of the year is gone. So 3 is expected of yourself. You may submit more, but council would be looking for minimum of that year. And this happens also to those people that are non-practicing, that had declared themselves non-practicing during the beginning of the year, and suddenly in August they decide, okay, I'm done with what I needed to do, I'm coming back to employment and practicing. Then they come back and they apply as such to council, and they are moved back to practicing register. You are not required to do all 6. 6 covers the 12 months. So the prorata works like that. Must CPDs relate specifically to pharmacy? The CPDs will relate to the competency standards of a pharmacist. But the competency standards, as I had broken down, covers such a plethora of activities, right from what is clinical to the person who is an academic and teaching and lecturing in whatever field. There's also issues of management, HR, human resource management in there. There's issues of pharmacoeconomics and health economics in there. So it's not necessarily a pharmacy as we define it, that we think a pharmacy is just the pharmacy is the community or the institutional or manufacturer. If you are learning, then you can submit a CPD. Another person, was it last night or the other night, asked that if I just read the pharmaciae of the pharmacy council, if I learned there, can it be a CPD? Of course, if you learned something in that pharmaciae that you didn't know, it is a learning to yourself, then you can submit. And if I cover you very much perfectly if that's the kind of work that you do. Is CPD compulsory for assistants? Oh, that's a nice question. Council, we're going to council now in May, requesting council to approve the competency standards for pharmacy support personnel, which are your assistants that fall under there, for comment. Please do comment when those come out, because immediately we're done with the comment period for those, that document will serve back at council for approval for implementation. By the end of this year, we hope that that will be through. And once the competency standards for pharmacy support personnel have been published for implementation, the next board notice that will come out will say it is now mandatory for pharmacy support personnel in the category post-basic, basic to submit CPD activities. And so at this stage, directly to this question, no, it is not compulsory, but we encourage assistants to start using this system, because once the switch on button goes on, then certainly they will have to submit CPD, and also their number will be 6 entries per year. So it will apply to every registered person. We've also been asked, does training by reps count for CPD? Again, yes, the rep has come to train you about ivermectin, you didn't know about it, and then you have learned something new, that's a learning, you submit it as a CPD activity. What is the process to apply for extension or condonation of CPD requirements due to ill health? There is a process on the guidance document that I've referred to yourselves, colleagues. There is what we call a deferment process. So do write a formal request addressed to the registrar of the pharmacy council to send to customer care requesting for deferment. Deferments have to go via the committee, the relevant committee of council, and eventually council for approval. So it is not just done in the office to approve this. So please, if you would want to follow that route for any reason, it does happen, you know, life sometimes is unpredictable, but please do write a formal request. Just like that, you may attach evidence, or you may not attach it at first value, but certainly when we do a follow-up to say we've received this request from yourself for deferment, can you provide further evidence? Because obviously the committee would ask, why does the person want deferment? So as much information that you can provide for that process. So there's no application form, but a request in writing to the registrar. And lastly, what I will address, and as I said, others will be in the frequently asked questions, when are CPDs due? CPD activity cutoff date is the 31st of December of each year. However, Council has given a grace period to the 30th of April of 2021. So that's, I guess, continually like that. But if by the 31st of December 2020 you had done all 6, you are compliant. But if you had not, you still have till next week Friday, by the way, to complete the 6 CPD activities by at that time, by midnight or by the time. I would suggest please do not try and clock the system around that time, because what then happens, if a lot of people, 1,000 people are trying to submit CPD activities all at the same time, the system does have tendencies to crash. We know how and what it's Murphy's Law and it's IT. IT not so much as Murphy's Law, because everyone now is all surrounding themselves around the same system. So if you can start today, if you had not finished, and finish by this weekend, that would be the best decision that you would have made. I'm hoping that after this session, for those of us that were not done, you will have gained some insight on how further to go with this. And with that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much. For any questions, I don't see any questions on the chat yet, but you are free to raise your hand for those that are in the Teams, and those that are on Facebook and YouTube. I think the questions will come through to us as you type them on those platforms. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any questions, or we are happy tonight?
Good evening, colleagues. There's a question on the chat.
Is there a question on the chat box? How do you delete? Oh, something moved quickly. How do you delete a chat, a CPD that was incorrectly captured? Is that the question, Mr. Maluka?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please assist me with those questions. I think because I'm projecting, I might be having a problem. If you have already pressed the submit button, unfortunately, you would not be able to delete. So you do need to use our web functionality on CPD. Please use the website functionality to say, please delete such and such an entry and put the heading of the entry that you want to delete. You are able to delete anything that you haven't pressed submit yet. Unfortunately, once you press submit, it is already on the systems of council. I'm hoping that that answers that question. Any other question?
Good evening, colleagues. The other question says, it's from Facebook, this one. On the new registration app, the picture of the registered person is sometimes missing on the app, although when looking on the website, it is there. To whom must this be reported to at SAPC? Missing pictures on the app. Thank you so much, Sanet Skon. You can report them to me, or you can send those queries to the CPD 2020 email. We will put in the email address in the comment box. And then I see that there is a hand. I'm unable to see your name. I can only see the P number. So please unmute yourself and ask your question.
P51322 has a hand up.
Yes.
Good evening. Hello. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
So I wanted to ask about community service. I was listening and you were saying the due date for CPDs is next Friday. Is it for everyone or us who started our community service in January? When is our due date?
Did you start in January of 2021?
Yes, in January of 2021.
Then your due date is the 31st of December of 2021 in that case.
Can I just add,
okay,
the 30th of April refers to those people that are not compliant with the 2020 submission.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Raisibe, there is another question here. I've received a number of inquiries in my area about pharmacists that are giving health talks in their facilities or communities. They have to prepare these talks. Will it be considered as CPD activities?
It on one of the learning activities, I think that will be one of the measurable ones. There is where we have mentioned that if you are invited to be a guest speaker and you do prepare for that, then you can use that, what you have learned during your preparations, to enter your CPD activity. But you will need to then log in on the website and enter that CPD activity. You cannot just say, I've facilitated training and therefore I comply. You need to then reflect on what you have learned. And then there's a follow-up. Provide the web address for deleting. Zenda, did you say they can delete?
No, the question is, please send your query if you need anything deleted to the email address provided there, cpd2020@sapc.za.org, on the screen provided.
Thank you. So please send your queries there. And when you do, please specify which CPD entry in particular you would like to be deleted, especially if you have other CPD entries there, to make it easier for us. And there is a question that is saying, how does the app work? I tried to log in, it says invalid. There is where you can reset your login details, but if it still gives you problems, please send us that query through to CPD 2020 at SAPC, and then we will send it through to our IT unit so that they can assist you. Whilst we're still waiting for more questions, Mrs. Mukwena, our brand new COO, has joined us. So, Mukwena, I don't know if you want to greet us today, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, team. And good evening, colleagues. I think for me, I just want to thank all of you for making time to spend your evening with us. I actually asked Deborah to prepare some stats so that we can see that we are on the right track and that we can see that we tried our best to reach out to you and your families. I am told that to date, we managed to reach around 13,900 pharmacists. When we started, we were not really sure if we will get there to everyone, but we are so privileged that you took time to make sure that you spent your evening with us, and that is highly appreciated. I'm also told that accessible after the sessions, so if maybe you missed something, you can come back to that. My video is not working. I was trying to see everyone so that you see the person you're talking to. I'm also told that I think on this platform we have over 1,905. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the team from Pharmacy Council. I think most of the team have been here every single night to make sure that they do support this platform. We also have people from communication. I always forget to thank those people because they are not pharmacists, but they are here every single night to make sure that the connection is good. So this team is working very hard so that we support everyone. But most importantly, thank you all that connected, either downloading through YouTube, Facebook, and those of you that are literally here. Thank you. Today is our last night, but like I said, Zianda will give you all the links where you can access these videos. And I'm hoping that we will be very proud. One of these days, I think one of us or yourself will write a paper about this evening, because we've always been a little bit behind as a country when it comes to implementation of CPD. When we communicate with our stakeholder internationally, some countries are very far. But we have managed, with your support, to move with speed, that we have been able to also make some footprint, that we are there. Now, the next thing that we need to look at is to make sure we put this at the next step. Take it with a positive spirit. From council, we put just the basic, just the platform. But the bigger picture is, how do you take this opportunity to make sure that you learn and you record that you have learned? We don't doubt the fact that we learn every day as pharmacists. And we have COVID now. 2-3 years along the line, we're going to have something else. There is a story to tell. There is history to be made and to be captured. And we are the only one who can capture it best. We can actually pass that information to our children, our grandchildren, because it will have been documented somewhere. As pharmacists, sometimes we don't have time to reflect and to write our story. This platform gives us an opportunity to do just that. We can write and make it as interesting as possible, because at the moment, nobody's assessing us. Write it in the language that will make sense to you. Write it in the language that when you go back and you want to use that information, it can still be used. I can tell you now from experience, I've been doing this for years, and I've seen the value of this platform where I can record my CPD activities. On that note, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank every single one of you. I know you work so hard. I know that by 6 o'clock, all of us are tired. We don't want anything. But if a pharmacist can take that hour and sit in front of their laptops, connect from their phones anyway to try and listen to the session and say, how do I support this profession? And how do I raise that flag of pharmacy that high? Then I think all of us, we really, really understood ourselves when we chose this profession to say, we want to serve. I talk too much, so I'm going to pause here. And with those few words, I want to say thank you so much. Let's go out there and do good. And our blessing shall follow with the good heart, with the humility, with the love for this profession, and saving those that really depend on us for their lives, because they are not pharmacists. So their survival depends on us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, colleagues. There is, I think, a 2 or is a 3-tier question in the comments. It comes from YouTube, so I will try and ask it one tier at a time. So the first one says, technical question on software, is Dashboard Town? I'm not going to answer that because we don't have technicians in here today, so I'll skip it. Next one says, where does save put your work in progress and how to retrieve to continue to complete? So when you are either on the app or on this website and you have done the one step and you save it, when you come back, you are able to retrieve that information, and under edit, you click on edit and then you continue. And then another one is when to archive at what stage. You do not archive. The system archived for those that have complied with their 2020 CPD requirements already. The reason for that was for us to clear your dashboard so that you can start afresh for 2021. So the system will do that for you. But if you happen to archive your CPDs in error and you would like to restore them, you go under the archive button and you will find where it allows you to restore that particular entry. By all means, you can do so. But if it's compliance CPD activities that we have archived, please leave them there. We have archived them and they are counting towards your compliance. Thank you. And then there's another one that is saying getting message invalid username or password when signing to the app. I think I do have your email address. I will be in touch with you tomorrow. Thank you. And then there's okay, 2 that are thanking the SAPC team. Okay, and 2 more. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. We know how difficult it is for you to get even 1 minute out of your day. So we really appreciate that you came to attend this session, and we are really hoping that after this session, you will be able to understand more and be able to shed your light to those colleagues out there that still do not understand what is going on. We have 8 days and I think 4 hours to go for those who do not yet comply with the 2020 requirements. So please make sure that you make use of your 8 days to comply. Are there any further questions, suggestions, anything at all you would like to discuss? From Facebook, there's one that says, well done, Mojo, Zianda, and the whole SAPC team for your huge effort in this regard. Thank you and appreciated by us, the pharmacy staff on ground level. We really appreciate you. We're also on ground level. So we are really happy that you appreciate us. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. On that high note, I would like to close off this masterclass. We really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.